Hi, I'm Jack Dennis. I'm going to be your host and guide for the next few minutes as you learn more about the art of European nymphing. I first discovered this technique as coach of the U.S. fly fishing team in the World Fly Fishing Championships. Most of the championships that I have gone to over the years have occurred in Europe, giving me the opportunity to go there and see firsthand how successful this technique can be in improving your fishing. You're going to get a lot of instruction. A lot of it may be somewhat confusing. I'm going to try to make that less confusing. I like to compare the techniques in European nymphing to the sport of golf and the golf swing. At first, a golf swing seems relatively easy. The more you swing the golf club, the more you know how complex it really is. It takes lots and lots of practice, and you never perfect it. The same with the art of the European nymphing. At first, it seems relatively easy, but the more you do it, the more you'll learn. It takes a lot of practice. The more you practice, the better you become. For the next few minutes, I'd like to tell you some of the background and some of the history of European nymphing and why it's so effective. But first, let's go to Europe. There's no question that Europe has great fishing. It does not have the quantity of fish that we have in the U.S. Fish management, catch and release techniques are relatively new to Europe. However, the fishing fraternity is very advanced, and especially the sport of nymphing. The streams, for the most part in Europe, are very fast-moving mountain streams. However, they do have spring creeks. You can't help but notice when watching fishermen in Europe the lack of use of indicators. Their techniques are very similar to high sticking, as we call it here in the U.S., except they're slightly pulling the nymphs faster than the current, relying on feeling the strike. While there are lots of big rivers where you see a lot of nymph fishermen, there are also smaller rivers in countries like Spain, France, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland. And don't forget, Bosnia and Croatia has wonderful spring creek fishing. France is known as the dry fly capital of Europe with their use of CDC feathers on their flies. However, you'll see dry fly fishing done throughout Europe as many times as you can find insect catches on the surface and fish rising to them. The industrial buildup after World War II took its toll on the mayfly hatches of Europe, leaving many streams with stoneflies and caddis only. With cleaning up the streams, a bright future of mayflies returning to most of the streams in Europe has changed a lot of the fishing. However, it's still nymphing which drives the European mindset. There's no question that the European grayling is what put European nymphing on the map. This fish is quite different than our Arctic grayling. It actually has one of the softest takes of any fish that I've ever encountered. The European grayling can act so much like a trout. It can be selective, it can feed furiously, it can be sometimes easy to catch, other times almost impossible. But one thing is absolutely for sure, it is one of the hardest fish that you can imagine to hook. It has a very soft take, and it can challenge some of the world's best fishermen. The European grayling is much larger. I've actually caught fish 5 to 6 pounds in Sweden, and is much smarter than our Arctic grayling. The most prized trout in Europe is their native wild fish, the German brown trout. Most European countries have good stocks of wild brown trout. However, the densities doesn't compare to what you find here in America. What's interesting about this fish is the different varieties of brown trout you find throughout Europe, such as this trout from Spain. Notice the spot just by the gills. The range of the European brown trout is quite extensive, from North Africa all the way into Iran and Afghanistan. Varieties of brown trout can be found throughout Russia, even in Siberia and the Kamchatka Peninsula. Europe, like America, imported non-native trout. About the same time they exported German brown trout to America, we exported rainbows to Europe. The hard-fighting rainbow found a home in Europe, and they're in many of the lakes, streams, and reservoirs. In fact, they're in most all the European countries, including the Scandinavian countries. You know, they may be our most successful export. It's 5:30 in the morning, high in the mountains of Slovakia, on a beautiful June morning for the World Fly Fishing Championships in 2004. There are over 40 countries that belong to the Federation, which governs the World Fly Fishing Championship. The event is sanctioned by the same organization that sanctions World Championships and the Olympics. Olympic-style rules and medals are awarded the same way as in sports competitions in the Olympics. Medals for individual competition and medals for teams.
Well, we've got our first competitor on the 6 o'clock bus, headed for the river that's furthest away, the Orava.
That's what it's
and we've got 23 countries participating this year. The flags are displayed for us out here, and some of the most unusual ones that we don't see back home very often. Here's Wales. Great flag, terrific flag, wonderful flag. Of course, all the Europeans have been fishing this water on and off for months. They can basically drive here, so that helps a great deal. The further away countries have to either make a reconnaissance trip here early in the year, 60 days prior to the competition, or fish basically a few days practice before the competition program begins. And of course that would be Japan and the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
The World Championships were started over 30 years ago in Europe. Europe had a rich history of fly fishing competition dating back to the early 20s. While fly fishing competitions isn't everybody's cup of tea, it can be compared to auto racing and the advances it has given the sport. Consider this. Beadhead nymphs came from the Belgian fly fishing team when faced with the dilemma of not being able to use lead. Add to this tungsten beads, weighted leaders, long rods, woven nymphs, and the list goes on.
20 centimeter? He's about 8 inches.
Besides spreading the joy of fly fishing and friendship throughout the world through these competitions, the most important fishing technique to come out of these events is the European nymphing technique. Many of you may know it under the name of Czech nymphing, but it really started out as Polish nymphing. Both the French and the Spanish added their own techniques to this basic nymphing technique. And the rest, as they say, is history. In the aftermath of World War II, there was no question that European fishing was going to take a hit when the Iron Curtain cut off some of the best fishing Europe had in the Eastern Bloc countries such as Poland, Czechoslovakia, and the Yugoslavian countries. Not only did the Iron Curtain divide families, cultures, and religion, it also divided the fly fishermen of Europe. The Western Europeans were not allowed to fish the streams in the Eastern Bloc countries. Nor were the Eastern Bloc fly fishermen allowed to have any exchanges with the West. During these dark times, there were great advances in fly fishing. Floating lines, fiberglass and graphite rods, and a wealth of new fly patterns. And most importantly, Gore-Tex waders. The Poles, the Czechs, the Yugoslavians loved their fly fishing. While they tried to get access to this equipment, it was virtually impossible. Many times they could get the fly fishing magazines only to see the equipment that they could not either afford or have access to. Still, this did not stop them fishing. And in spite of the stringent Soviet regulations, imposed by the regimes which discouraged sport fishing, fly fishing still flourished by clubs. This gave the opportunity for the Eastern Bloc countries to send teams. Having a sporting event made fishing more palatable to the government officials, and fly fishing clubs that held competitions kept the sport of fly fishing going in these countries. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, change would be coming to Eastern Europe, both politically and on the fishing scene. Finally, some of the Eastern Bloc countries could send teams to European Fly Fishing Championship. They got a chance to see some of the Western equipment and the way that they fished, and at first they were intimidated. They had poor equipment, rudimentary wading boots. Everything was way behind the times, but so was the rest of their country. But it wouldn't take long for them, over the next few years of going to these contests, to soon learn how to compete. By the mid-1980s, they were starting to really make progress. Once the Berlin Wall came down and everything opened up, they were ready for World Championship competition. In Finland, it would all change. A young man by the name of Vladi would change everything in Eastern European fishing. Western Europe was going through quite a bit of change. They were banning lead, which led to the bead-headed nymphs. They were changing a lot of the streams and becoming more catch and release oriented. Everything was coming around to become more, you might say, Americanized in their fly fishing. Strike indicators, some of our dry fly techniques. However, the contest would be stringent on the rules. Lead would be banned, no indicators, and in Finland, most of these regulations then were in place. Just right for the Polish team, and a new method that was going to be shown to the rest of the Europeans by a man by the name of Vladi. Vladislav Tribunia was a man who had learned fishing from his grandfather and father, and over the years had developed a very deadly technique, soon to be known as Polish nymphing. As a ski racer and ski instructor, Vladi was used to competition. His nymphing technique would be perfect for the Polish team. The team was ready to compete in Finland in 1989. The team arrived in Finland without the sophisticated equipment, rods, reels, and uniforms and everything that the other European nations possessed, but a desire to compete and show the world Vladi's technique. Some of my friends who were involved in world fly fishing said he was a colorful character with patches on his waders and really inferior equipment. He proceeded to teach the Europeans in their all fancy gear the lesson in nymphing. He won the world championship with his Polish nymphing techniques and his superbly tied, unconventional woven nymphs and flies made out of condoms. Everybody was following Vladi and watching his techniques. Word had gotten out that he had some special secret fly, a Polish nymph that was woven. He had shown the world a new method of hooking not only the European grayling, but large quantities of other fish, including even a huge Atlantic salmon that didn't count. Vladi's performance was about to change the face of European fishing forever. Not only did he win a gold medal, but he won with such a margin that he had more points individually than the first, second, and third place teams. His methods were legendary. While other Europeans, such as the Czechs and the Slovaks, had nymphing techniques, it was Vladi's performance that inspired all of them to get better. The influence between the European countries drove a first competition. The Czechs had their Czech nymphs and their techniques, but the Polish nymphing would be what inspired all of Europe to get better at their type of nymphing. A resurgence in fly tying would occur with the interest in the woven Polish and Czech nymphs. The friendly and fierce competition among the two countries has really been a great reward for us in the West. Not only did we realize that we would have to learn these techniques if we would be successful in world fly fishing competition, but they would be techniques that would adapt to our fishing back in America, especially in the fast-rushing streams of the Rockies. In the early 1990s, both the French, the Czechs, and the Polish were mastering their nymph techniques, ready for America. Fly fishing was booming in Europe, and they had fell in love with the great American equipment.
I love you, America! I love you!
Hold on, we get the Sims here. You like Sims?
Sims is the best.
They're the best?
Everything Sims. Shorts.
Best?
And
all right.
jackets.
Wait, let's take a look. Hey, we like that.
I like it.
We like that.
Thank you very much, Sims. Thank you.
In 1997, America would get their first look at European nymphing. The World Championships were coming to America. The French came early to America, bringing the European nymphing techniques and the use of multiple flies. The techniques were successful as they won their first world championship and would begin a long road of being on the medal stand virtually every year since that point. There was no question that European nymphing would be effective in America, as the French, Polish, and Czech teams dominated the medal stand. In Jackson Hole was the first time that I was able to see both the Polish, Czech, and French techniques of European nymphing. It was devastating to see how many fish that they caught. I was fascinated by how successful these anglers were. It made perfect sense. I had, for many years, had given lectures on how to improve your nymphing technique by more effectively using an indicator to visually watch the fish. But to feel the fish was something that I was going to have to learn more about. In 2003, I took over as coach of the U.S. fly fishing team. I invited Vladi to become a part of the team as advisor.
Yesterday rain and what rise a lot. Our situation looked
This would be the first time that we were able to put an effort into learning the art of European nymphing, whether it be Polish nymphing, Czech nymphing, French nymphing, or now, in this case, in 2003, Spanish nymphing, because the World Fly Fishing Championships were going to be held in Spain. My fishing department manager, Jeff Currier, took an interest in the World Championships and in European nymphing. It was his interest and thirst for knowledge that gave us Vladi. To understand the effectiveness of European nymphing is to understand the effect it had on Jeff Currier.
Exposed to the Fly Fishing World Championships when it was right here in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I was not a participant, but rather someone who donated some time to help the whole thing run. And it was really neat. I got to meet people from all the different teams, and best of all, I learned real quickly how good the Europeans were at fly fishing. You figure here it is in USA, Team USA was going to do very well, maybe get a medal. Far from the truth. They had a really tough time competing on their own waters. And because of that, naturally myself and a lot of other fishing guides around Jackson Hole said, we should be on that team, we would have won it. Well, they kind of laughed at us and, you know, probably thinking, no, you probably wouldn't have won it, which is very true. And also the fact that it took money to go to this thing. And when you throw a price tag out there for fishing guides to go compete in that championship, they're probably not going to be able to show up. But to make a long story short, miraculously, I did get to go next year, in 1998, to compete in Poland. And that was my first real experience on European waters, competing against the Europeans themselves. In Poland is where I met Vladi. I was very fortunate to meet Vladi. I had heard a little bit about him. Really no Americans knew anything about him other than he had won the World Championships in 1989 in Finland with this new technique called Polish nymphing. And so I figured when I got over there, I'd learn a little bit about that, apply it to what I already knew, and be in great shape. And it's kind of a funny story. I flew into Warsaw thinking everything was going to be cool. I'd hop in a bus and head down to Zakopane and meet Vladi. But the language barrier in Poland at that time was so bad that I was about starving by the time I got to Zakopane. And I was delighted to meet Vladi. Vladi looked at me, we shook hands, and I said, thank you for looking after the Team USA fly fishing team. I hope that you have a lot of fun with it. He looked at me and he said, all I want out of this is to improve my English. And he didn't say it quite that well because his English was really bad. And I said, all I want to do is make sure I'm a better fisherman when I leave this first competition, and the rest of the team feels the same. First thing Vladi wanted us to do as a team was get in the water and fish, and he was smart about it. He said, this area here has a lot of grayling in it, a few brown trout. Why don't you guys go out there and do your best, stay between here and there. There's no reason why you shouldn't all catch about 20 fish in the next couple hours. Well, we went out there, fumbled around. Vladi could only watch us for about 15 minutes before he walked right down and grabbed the rod out of Jay Buchner's hand and said, no, you do it like this. And we had probably caught like 3 grayling in this area in the first half hour. Vladi made 4 casts and caught 4 grayling. And we knew that we had a lot to learn. And that was the beginning of learning Polish nymphing. It was pretty neat watching Vladi over there helping Jay Buchner, and he helped a couple other guys in the team, and I couldn't wait for my turn for him to actually come show me. And I said, you know, Vladi, come on over here and just tell me what you would do. And he took the rod from me, and I had been in the spot and I had caught 2 grayling. And he threw it out there, well, flipped it. We're talking Polish nymphing, very short line deal, but he flipped it out there, dun 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 dun, boom, he got a grayling, he picked it up. And he said, just like that. And I said, just like what? And he goes, I know where the fish are, so I automatically set the hook when I think my fly is there. And the reason they do that is because the grayling takes the fly so gently, as do trout here. Maybe not as quite as gently as grayling, but he didn't want to take any chance of missing the fish. So it's like dry fly fishing. You know when your fly is going to go over where the fish is going to take it, you're ready. You're ready to set the hook. Vladi, he fishes nymphs the way we fish dry flies. He knows exactly where his fly is and when it's going to get eaten. So he said, imagine that rock right there. You could just barely see it under the surface with my polarized glasses. He said, if there's a grayling here, he's probably going to be right by that rock. And I said, yeah, that makes sense. He said, okay, throw your flies up there, and when you think your fly's by that rock, just simply do a little tiny hook set. And that's all it takes, a little hook set like that. So Vladi said, when you think that your nymph is by that rock, set the hook, but do it lightly so you don't pull your flies too far away from it. Because all it takes is a little flip of the wrist like this to hook a grayling, and a trout for that matter. So it seemed too easy. Flipped my flies up there. I pulled them slightly downstream like you do in Polish nymphing. And when I thought my flies were by that rock, I simply did a little flip. I could not believe it. I had a fish on, I felt it. I lifted up, there was a grayling flopping on the surface. I was almost in shock. But I had taken such a massive step forward in my nymphing quality that my life would be changed. And I'll tell you what, I'm not big into nymphing, but that felt good. I did it again. I said, could there possibly be another one there? Of course there probably is. Same spot, tick, set the hook, another grayling. And you know, we spent that first half hour and probably caught 3 or 4 grayling between the whole team. The next 10 minutes we probably caught 15 to 20 grayling just because of Vladi's technique. And for the last, I guess now 10 years that I've known Vladi, I've learned so much from him. Luckily I've been able to distribute the wealth by helping him with his dry fly fishing because he's come to the United States and visited me a few times. Spain is where I put together all the things I had learned in the World Championships together and made it work and made it count. Of course, Polish nymphing was a huge part of that. We had a lot of tough beats in Spain. Basically, it was 4 river beats and 1 lake beat. And I had it in the order probably from the easiest to the toughest. So the first couple days I was looking real good, like I was going to be a medal candidate, but I knew that every time my beats would get harder. And where I really, really shined was on my 4th beat on the toughest river when I had to put to work my Polish nymphing techniques. And it was really cool. I was actually pretty darn close to tied with Tomas, somebody that I idolize. I think he's one of the greatest, if not the best fishermen in the world on a consistent basis. And then my good friend from the English team, Billy the Kid. We were all competing to get into the 1, 2, or 3rd place. And I had caught a couple fish on this beat, but I knew that I probably had to catch 3, 4, maybe even 5 fish to be consistent with my competitors there, Billy and Tomas. And there was about 20 minutes left. My beat had a couple spots that I really hadn't fished that hard because I was saving them to Polish nymph. But whether I'd actually come through on it, I didn't know, but I felt pretty good about it. So I rigged up my Polish nymph leader and literally in about 30 seconds, which is what you got to be able to do in this tournament to compete. And I crawled into position over the top of my waders, took on a couple mouthfuls of water, and I proceeded to Polish nymph. And I had my 4-weight on because I was dry fly fishing the whole time, so I used my 4-weight to Polish nymph just to save not having to deal with another rod. And it ended up being perfect because these were small fish. But I started the tail of my pool, and like the 3rd flip, Polish nymphing, I got a brown, measurable brown, right around 10 inches long. And that was my 4th fish. I knew I was sitting pretty at that time, but was it going to be good enough? I didn't know. So I proceeded forward again. I crawled right back into where I left off that first fish. I went a little bit further. I remember my guide, who didn't speak very good English at all, he was a Spanish guide/judge, saying, "You have 3 minutes to go." And I was like, okay, man, now I'm really working it hard. And with about a minute left, I actually got another fish and another 10-inch brown, and I brought him over. So I ended up having 5 fish for the session. And that put me in a dead tie with Tomas and Billy the Kid for 3rd place. So a couple of us were going to go down in the next session. And unfortunately for me, the 5th session was going to be on the lake at a beat that nobody had caught any fish the entire tournament. Probably one of the most exciting 3 hours of my life was the beat 5 when I was going to the lake. The entire competition, the weather had been literally 95 to 110 degrees, and the lake was pretty much kicking everybody's butt. There were a few beats that produced fish. The beat I happened to be going to was terrible. And I was tied for 3rd place, and people were writing me off. All my competitors, European competitors, were shaking my hand, patting me on the back and saying, "Jeff, you did a great job, but you're going to the lake, so you're probably going to get blanked and drop into 20th place, but boy, we really think that you did well, blah, blah, blah. Well, that was the last thing you tell Currier because it gets me fired up. And the funny thing is I had crawled all morning to get those 5 fish to be in 3rd place, and I was soaking wet. The weather changed. I mean, it dropped down into the 40s. I was soaking wet, I was shivering. I remember the bus got to the lake. It was a huge thunderstorm, it was blowing hard. Here we are, the lake beat is one where you stand on the shore, and I'm going to the worst part of the lake. I was borderline hypothermia, and along comes Vladi and Ed Oppler. And Vladi pulls the sweater off his back. It was a beautiful Polish sweater, I might add. I love these things. Throws it on me, and at least I was going to be warm enough to fish for 3 hours. And Ed Oppler had an 8-weight rod with a bunch of sinking lines. He's like, here you go, Jeff, we brought this because you're going to need it. And I said, Ed, put that stuff away. I'm using my 4-weight and dry flies. And he looked at me like my hair was on fire. But everybody had been using sinking lines, and there had been 8 fish caught in the entire tournament. I'm not going to do that. I knew my beat. There were whitecaps on the lake, but something I had learned years ago in Australia, that doesn't mean fish aren't going to be looking up if there's bugs in the water. I set up on my beat. I knew I had to catch a fish to get a medal. I thought maybe I even had to catch 2, but I actually put on my favorite fly here at home, a thorax mahogany dun, and I threw it out there in some of the glassy spots right on the edge of a point that was in my beat. The whitecaps were a foot away, my fly sat in this little glassy spot, and I sat on a rock like I was bait fishing and watched my fly, only 10, 15 feet from shore, did not make a long cast, and sat there and stared at it. Funny thing, Ed Oppler, Vladi, and my judge were all sitting up there. They were chatting like I was crazy. And 14 minutes into the three-hour session, I just saw something take my fly. I just saw it disappear, and I just went, bing! I had a fish on. I could not believe it. Didn't fight it. There was no fighting. Strip, 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 in the net. I looked in the net, and I had a 9 3/4-inch brown trout. Doesn't sound like much, but somehow I knew that fish would put me over the top. And everybody came running down, up and down. It was funny. I'm like, come down, calm. It's only 14 minutes. I have a chance to catch more fish. I don't want to spook any others. They came down, measured the fish, and I mean, I let out a cheer like I've never done before. It's almost kind of funny when I look back at it. I'm sure all the other contestants around the lake were like, oh no, Currier caught a fish. But most important fish I've ever caught in my life.
The bronze medal for Mr. Jeff Currier of the United States.
Congratulations to Jeff.
I opened my fly box, felt like I was going to put a dry fly on, and I did. And within 14 minutes, I landed a fish on a beat that only produced 1 fish through the whole tournament. So it was a miracle. I'll take it. I was pretty psyched. Well, I think this medal is going to help, you know, getting a 3rd place, and this is going to bring some attention to the team, maybe some better sponsorship, and of course then that'll lead to having a better team. And this year we made a huge step. As a team we got 8th place, and that's top 10 is hard to do in this, you know, especially when you're in Europe competing against the Europeans.
Let's join Jeff now in Spain as he talks himself through a practice session of European nymphing.
And when I say anchor, we're talking tungsten bead head, extremely heavily leaded hook. I still got my 2 flies on. I switched my upper fly to a tungsten bead head nymph. Tungsten is very heavy, as most people know. So I've got 2 tungsten heads.
We're going to leave Jeff now and come back with some tips from him a little later on in the DVD. But what I want to do first is take you through the basics of European nymphing. You're going to hear a dry land explanation of the nymphing from Vladi himself. Then we'll go right into the instruction of the 3 basic types of European nymphing. So let's get started.
A relatively good time to catch fish where the insects, you know, are going to surface, and then we try and find a way to catch them. Of course, we put some weight to the nymphs, and so it was very important because always the insects start from the bottom, and always when I cast with my flies, I want to be always in the bottom first, and then I'm a little bit faster than current water, and they take off flies, you know, very quick from the water. And this movement is very similar like the insects live in the water. And very important is speed. If you cast with the nymphs, you can cast upstream and follow fly, and speed like one, you count like 1, 2, 3, and take off, you know, nymphs from the water. And in that time, this is the best time to catch fish, because, you know, always, I think, maybe you agree with me, the first seconds, you know, 1, 2, 3 is the best for any kind of fish, you know. Because sometimes fish, like in a very fast water, haven't time to see, you know, very good. Only fish go like fish have the natural reflex, you know, and they go to something what move in the water. And remember remember the nymphs or something like that. We fish with the heavy nymph, with the indicator, like something like that. You know, if I am a little bit faster than the current, I feel every single stance in water. But if fish took your fly, is something specific. You know, this is practice across years. But I think the people can feel it this immediately. Where is the touch of fish, or where the nymphs are jumping, you know, in the bottom on the stones.
Because of our use of indicators as floats, drifting the nymph and keeping them at a level has been effective. However, it is not nearly as effective, especially in fast water, as the European system, because it has some drawbacks. The first limitation from a strike indicator is that the nymph will be pushed forward of the indicator due to the increased current underneath the surface and with the current pushing the total leader forward. Because of this angle, a fish that is in the same plane feeding as the nymph will simply open his mouth, ingest the nymph, long before the indicator will go down. For the indicator to work properly, the fish must see the fly above him, take the fly, then return to where he was feeding, thus pulling down the indicator. Watch this fish in its subtle take, watch his elevation in the water column, and then you determine whether you think he could pull an indicator down. The indicator will have to ride almost completely over the fish before you know there's any indication of a strike. Most of the time, the fish just lets go of the fly, as you see here. Watch this. Takes the fly, a second later, he spits it out. Not nearly enough time for you to know that it happened. In European nymphing, what's going to happen is the fish spots the nymph pulling for the water, takes the nymph, and you're immediately going to feel the strike and hook the fish. The next important basic will be the cast. If you could really call it a cast. It's really no back cast. It's a rotation of the wrist. It's very similar to a roll cast pickup. But what we're going to do is show you some of the key elements, and you'll agree after you've done it. There's an important part of this cast that's going to make you more effective. I like to say it's a unsophisticated reach mend, except without the mend. To start the forward cast, you do the quick little hook set, and now you start by rotating your wrist and increasing power. The cast is a full stroke cast, rotating the wrist, turning the spine of the rod in the direction of the cast. This will cause the fly to land straight upstream without a belly. In slow motion, the hook set, now the rotation of the wrist, increasing the power, And at this point, you can see where the position of the wrist is. Now the cast continues forth, increasing the power. Again, notice the position of the wrist. The cast will complete with the same wrist position, slightly turning the spine of the rod and keeping the fly line going straight with the tip of the rod upstream. Notice how straight the line is to the tip of the rod. This will improve your ability to feel the strike. When we put it all together, it looks like this in real time. The next step becomes the swinging of the fly and the position of the rod. Your rod position will determine how the fly moves and drifts and at what depth. Before we talk about rod position, I want you to understand the swinging or pulling of the fly. This has to be done in a smooth and direct position, moving the rod tip at the same plane downstream, as you see right here. This will become more apparent as we get further into the tape. First-time European nymphing mistakes occur usually with the cast. The minute the fly hits, not pulling the fly immediately or moving the rod too quickly downstream. This will relate to a big belly in the line, where the fly is actually going downstream with the current and not being pulled. This becomes very apparent in slow motion. A lot of it has to do with rod position and how fast and smooth the fly is pulled. Now, Jeff Currier has a great tip for beginning European nymphers.
Here's a couple tips for me from fishing in Europe quite a bit. We'll call it the European Currier nymphing tips. I like to swim my flies, something that Vladi taught me, meaning that I throw them upstream instead of dead drifting like people do with an indicator. I slowly drag them along. Tick, tick, tick. I feel it on the bottom. I know that tick, and if anything different, boom, I set the hook. Okay? How do you know if you're pulling your flies the right speed? Spot something in the water. Maybe it's a leaf, maybe it's a bubble, and make your rod tip go slightly faster than that, and you know now you are swimming your flies along the bottom.
The next thing to consider is the position of the rod during the swing. How high you should hold it, how close to the water. This will determine how your flies are pulled through the water. The higher the rod in slower moving water, the higher the flies are going to move through the water column. My best tip is to go out in clear water that's moving that you can see depth and see what your rod does. See how the flies react. Put on some very brightly colored flies and watch the effect. But most often, just going out and fishing will help you determine this. Now let's take a look at some rod positions and the relationship to the fly. Now we're watching Vladi with a higher rod in slowing moving water, letting the fly sink down and start bumping on the bottom. If he chose to move this rod a little faster, would probably bring the flies up a little higher. Again, raising his rod, moving the flies a little faster, would then have them catch the higher current and move the flies downstream away from the bottom. Learning to watch the line will tell you a lot about what your flies are doing. Right now, you see the flies bumping on the bottom, or at least what we call the anchor fly is bumping on the bottom. Again, Vladi has adjusted his pull so that the flies will jump on the bottom. Now I want you to watch right here as a line bumps the bottom and a fish takes it, but unfortunately Vladi misses him. Here it comes, the line bumping on the bottom. Now it goes tight as the fish takes the fly. The fish is lucky. This doesn't happen too often to Vladi. Now let's have Jeff Currier tell us more about pulling the fly.
Now when I say pulling the flies, I just want to make it clear. I'm not pulling the flies like a streamer or sweeping them along. What I'm doing is I'm pulling them just hard enough that number one, they look like they're swimming downstream, but more importantly, Think about it, from the tip of my rod to my flies. If I'm pulling them, there's no belly in my leader. It's a literally straight connection to them. So if a fish takes my fly, I feel it. It's not like I have a big bellow in my leader and I have to wait for the fish to straighten that out before I feel him. I'm on top of it like that.
As you watch this DVD, you're going to understand there'll be different ways of pulling the fly, but they all will have rhythmic movement, keeping the rod on the same plane, adjusting for river currents, and getting the feel that Jeff Currier talked about. This will be something you'll develop like golf. The more you do it, the more you're going to learn to feel the flies bumping on the bottom, the line tighten through your finger. This is an incredible technique, but it's going to take some work. Now watch Vladi work backhanded on some heavy water. If you watch real carefully, you can see how the fly telegraphs that it's bouncing on the bottom. Coming up in just a moment is one of the most important parts. It's the anchor nymph, or in our case, kind of a strike indicator in reverse. Understanding the anchor nymph fly is the key to European nymphing. There is no split shots on the leader to cause drag. All the weight is in the fly. So the anchor nymph is your weight. It can bump on the bottom, it can be above the bottom, but most important, it provides the weight to hold the fly in the current and track. Picking an anchor nymph is just as intricate as picking the right dry fly. As you can see, this is a box of European style flies. On the left side here, we're looking at anchor nymphs in a variety of different styles, from worms to caddis flies to heavy stone flies to mayflies. Most often, the anchor fly will be attached to the end of your tippet, or what we call the point fly. By casting the dropper fly upstream, it will sink to the bottom, pulling the dropper fly and the anchor fly to the bottom. Notice how the bend of the hook bumps against the rocks, not with the point but the bend, like in a clouser minnow. Both the design of the fly and the pulling of the fly will create this. Then further up the leader will be what we call the dropper fly, attached through a system of using a loop that will then slide down to a knot. To attach the dropper, we tie a double perfection knot, and then with our length of our dropper, whatever we've decided to be, we'll go through the loop. The loop will then be slid down to the leader above the knot, and then we'll attach our dropper fly. All this will be shown to you throughout this DVD, including the knots. The dropper flies shown on the right-hand side of this box have their own characteristics. Many of them, of course, are the European-style nymphs, which are many times woven like in the Czechs and the Polish nymphs. Other times there are a variety of caddis, mayfly, and stonefly patterns. Notice that most of them are beadheads. Once the dropper is attached, it can spin around on the leader, keeping it from twisting. The fly is cast. The anchor fly immediately goes to the bottom, and the dropper fly is visible. As the rod moves the flies downstream, the dropper fly bounces on the bottom. As it bounces on the bottom, it telegraphs information back up to the angler as he's moving the rod. He's watching the rod, he's feeling the movement through the line, and suddenly the line goes tight as the fish scoops up the anchor fly. He immediately feels the tightening of the line and the fish is on, as you can see here.
and I follow the fly, I'm back immediately with the flies, and every touch and every single, jump on the stones, I feel very well. But what I said before, if fish, take your fly, is something specific. It's not like jumping on stones, but that is a year of practice.
Now you feel it through your fingers?
I make like this,
Yeah,
always.
Let me get,
and
let
the
me get right
first moment, if of course, when I pull or strike, if fish take my fly, this loop helped me a lot because, it's something heavier on the end. And then, this first movement, when fish take the fly, helped me a lot here with this loop here. Because it's not that stiff, like this, only it's a little bit loose here,
Now let's look at the dropper fly as it drifts. The fish spots it, moves over, takes it, the line goes tight, and the fish is on. Notice that he is pulling the anchor fly. Good idea to have a lighter tippet on the anchor fly when you hook a fish on the dropper. This way you can lose the dropper rather than the fish. One of the most important factors about this system is where the fly hooks the fish. Almost all of them will be on the roof of the mouth. This is an exciting way. It's easy to release the fish. Again, proves the great contact you have with this system. Now let's look at how we set up the rod and all these flies and learn something about the knots.
Rig up the European nymphing systems and get a little advice from Vladi. First of all, rod. They probably have a 9-foot rod, most people do.
Yeah, mostly they use 9 foot, 9.6, 10 foot, because some people, they like longer rods. As like me, I use 9, I use 10, But some people, like French guys, use almost 12 feet rod because they present new technique, with casting.
And we're going to learn some of that technique too. Line. You use a floating line, right?
Yeah, always floating line.
Double tapered or weight forward?
Weight forward,
Oh.
That's the main line. You can use also a sinking line, but it's
No point really.
No point because it's very not good casting with those lines.
Understand, you're not going to have a lot of line out, so the line is really not much of a factor. It's how you rig this leader, and that's what we're going to talk about. First of all, I noticed that you have your leader butt section.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unique.
Yes. Maybe such this, because this I use like connector to the other leaders, And then I going to use some kind of monofill, color monofill, because
right there.
Like me, old man, I must see a little bit better, not like before.
So much of this technique has to do with all the senses, both visual,
of course,
right? Visual.
Quite right.
Then maybe what's in your mind.
Of course.
But one of the most important is feeling the fly line. Next, the whole leader. Now, what about length?
About length, I use like from my hand to my neck here. That's about, I don't know, really.
About 3 feet.
3 feet, around 3 feet. And then coming dropper.
Now, dropper. The first question you're going to say, why a dropper? Well, the technique that this system uses is actually pulling the fly, and the dropper becomes 2 aspects: a way to change flies quickly, but also the way that they're pulled through the water. So when you put on a dropper, one of the most popular ways is to do a blood knot and let the ear of the blood knot hang out. That's not what you want to do here. We're going to show you how to tie a perfection loop setup, And this is probably one of the hardest things for people to understand. Blood knots. Whether you use a surgeon knot, it's a knot. These leaders are sectioned, and they're sectioned for a reason, to keep the flies separated. Now, in world fly fishing competition, you use multiple flies, don't you?
Yeah.
And why do you use multiple flies?
You know, in a competition you can use 3 flies, but mostly I fish with 2 flies because, you know, 3 flies sometimes are more complicated. They twist, you know, but in a competition the dropper cannot move. You know?
It can't slide, so it has to be attached.
Has to be attached.
Now you notice this is sliding. When we talk about this dropper, this is put on with the perfection loop, but the beautiful thing about this is easy to take off when you have to change flies.
Right.
Now, distances. Now, I noticed that this is probably about, I would say 10 to 12 inches. How short would you make these? Is there any kind of formula?
Yeah, if I fish deep water, I can, I put always a longer dropper. If I fish shallow water, can be like this too, you know. It's much easier to cast. You cannot hang it, you know, the dropper between stones sometimes if you fish, you know, shallow water.
And another aspect too is if you hook this on something, you can break this off and not lose your whole rig.
Yeah,
that's another, of course, aspect of multiple rigs. Another thing that I think is important when we talk about having this perfection loop and how it slides is the ability to do this, right? It can rotate.
Yeah.
See how that rotates around? And that keeps the tangles to a minimum. Now, the first thing you're going to say, oh boy, I'm going to tangle a lot. That's probably one of the drawbacks of the system. You are going to tangle, but everybody who's fly fish knows that tangle's a part of fishing. All right, now, this is probably going to be the key element to this whole system. And I know that you know this English word, anchor.
Anchor.
What is it in Polish?
Ciężarek.
I want everybody to memorize that.
Very difficult.
Why? Why? Why the anchor nymph?
Because, you know, when I follow the nymph, I must have a little bit power on my line.
Weight. Get it down in there.
Then I can easily move, you know, the 2 flies. Of course, anchor fly can catch fish, and dropper almost the same.
Now I want you to think of this. Now this is going to be something that is really going to be the key to this. When you have a strike indicator on the surface, what does that do? It's a bobber. It's a fly fisherman's term for a bobber. What is it? It holds the fly out there. It hangs it so it stays in the same level. Well, let's take the anchor nymph and reverse it. The anchor nymph goes, and it's the indicator on the bottom. In other words, by it bouncing on the bottom, boom, 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 on the bottom, it holds this fly at the same level. So it's a strike indicator in reverse. Think of a heavy strike indicator. And now, one of the elements that I tell everybody is like an airplane where you have controls. It controls whether you go up or down. Well, guess what? Vladdy's arm here is going to be that control, because however he moves the rod up and down will determine where this fly is in the water column. And how fast he pulls it will also give that element. So as you can see, it's very important. There's a lot of aspects. If you think the thing is simple, be a golfer. One of the most simple maneuvers in the world is a golf swing. Boom, bring it back, bring it forward. Here, you pull the fly. Guess what? There's all those little turns and twists, raising and lower, that we're about to show you. But it starts with rigging this up. Now, one of the questions I want to ask you, Vladdy, what is your total length of leader? Because that's going to be a real important part of this.
Very important part. I use with Polish method, with my, I should say my method, I use 2/3 length of my rod.
All right, 2/3 the length of the rod.
Yeah.
Okay, so that if the rod is 9 feet, it's going to be about a 7-foot leader.
7-foot leader.
Yeah.
And much easier to see the bottom part of the line, and it's much helpful when you fish with my method.
Now, after the Czechs saw you win the World Championships, they developed, which is probably a little more catchier name, Czech nymphing, and they gave it a lot of publicity.
Yeah, of course, you know, I'm not worried about this, but every country, a lot of fishermen, they modified kind of modifications, you know. I should say the Czech make very good flies, and last success they come from, you know.
Now let me ask you this, as we're rigging up, and I've seen this done by the Czechs, where they put the weight in the middle fly, and then it anchors down, and then this fly then comes up.
Yeah.
Now, is that a method that they did, or did you do that?
You can do it this too, but if I fish deep water, my anchor, my bottom fly is heavier than dropper. If I fish shallow water, my dropper is heavier than the bottom fly.
So the rigging is really important here. The rigging is very important, because that you rig it for different types of water.
Yeah,
so
of course.
Let's take a review of this leader. You know, you have the anchor fly. Now we can change the anchor fly because it's the weight, it's a heavier fly in shallow water to the dropper fly. So it becomes the anchor fly is the dropper fly and your lighter fly is on the point fly. Remember, point fly. Now let's review the leader in length. It can vary according to water depth. We're going to learn more about it when we do fishing. It's important that you have these knots, and so the leaders can go back and forth between it. What about dropper length? Again, determined on the depth of the water. All this will become more apparent when we get actually down to the fishing.
A very important part of the European nymphing system is, of course, the knots attaching different sections of leaders. Not only do these knots attach to different sections of leaders, they provide a place above the knot to attach your loop leader connection for your dropper.
Hold here.
These are some of the best knots that Vladi likes to use. First will be the blood knot, followed by the double surgeons.
Here I'm going through. Now I hold with those two fingers, that size, and again I go 5, 1, 5 times, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I am going through again here. Sorry. Yes. Here. Okay. And you know, always a little bit wet, because then the knot is more strong.
The next knot we're going to show you is a surgeon's knot or a double surgeon's knot, which is another very popular way of attaching two different sections of leader. It'll give you the same type of knot that you need to work the dropper system. The dropper system needs this knot so that it can slide down the leader, and the knot, of course, will hold it from sliding all the way to the other fly. The dropper loop, which we'll be showing you in a minute, I think it'll help you make this all more understandable after you see how the knot is tied. As you can see, Vladi here is showing you how to attach the leaders together. And this knot has become a very popular knot here in the U.S. It still hasn't become as popular as the blood knot, but in many cases, especially in cold weather and with older anglers, this may be a much easier knot for you to use. In a moment, we will come to the dropper knot and then show you how to attach it. This could be the most important knot that you need to know in the European system. This is the dropper loop knot, the way to attach the dropper to your leader and to be able to take it off quickly to attach another one. Vladi will do a double loop knot. However, you can use a single one.
Twist 2 or 3 times because I want to have now 2 loops in here, and I've got 2 loops. You can see all length is the same, and then I am going through 2 times like this. 1, 32 with both 2 loops, and then a little bit harder. Yes, this the rest here also must be very tiny. Okay.
Now it's time to attach the loop to our leader. First of all, realize you have to be on the rod side of the leader. Obviously, once you put the loop around the leader, it's got to pull down to the knot. If you make the mistake and put it on the other side, it's going to slide right down to the fly. The nice thing about this knot, and the way we do it, of course, is to take the leader through the loop. You can tie your fly on and actually take your fly through the loop, and then slide it down the leader, pull it tight, and then ease it down to the knot. This will also allow it to spin a little bit on the leader, rotate, and keep from twisting. This is a very effective way of putting in your fly for the European system. The immediate question I usually get is what X should be your dropper tippet and the lengths of the dropper ticket. We're going to ask that question to Vladi, but most of the time it's the same test or X as your anchor fly.
If I fish shallow water, that I use this dropper maybe that long only, like maybe 10-12 centimeter. If I fish deep water, I use this dropper sometimes like to 2/3 of the length of the, the leader, top leader down there. It's about here. But I got like this, and then I show you how to put on dropper fly and my knot. I use my worm. Is good distance now? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, there I go through, and then hold this fly here or worm, and on top of my 2 fingers I'm going to make 2 round loops. I've got 2, and I want to have another little one, and I make them on my 1 finger here, and I've got 2 and 1 loop. This is a little one, this is 2 the same length, and I'm going with the end of the monofill through twice, through 3 loops. Okay, I've got it.
More to your right, I got your hat
Okay,
in there.
and then not too tiny,
Hold it. Yeah, there you go.
not too tiny,
Got it? Okay.
and I going, to the head of the fly of the hook, and then you can see now how it's going on with this.
Okay, hold on, let me get in close,
Yeah,
real close. I can get in
yeah,
very close. Okay.
and you can see now, like it's going on 1 and 2, and then I'm going fast a little bit with power, and you can see now all knot is under the eye here. Can only cut this piece, not too close like I said before, because sometimes I can open, but you can see nothing, only monofill, and eye. Okay?
We call it Euro Nymphing, or European nymphing. We're going to introduce you to this technique. Vladi's going to teach you. We're here on the Big Thompson River in Colorado. We're here at the National Fly Fishing Championships, where a lot of people are going to be using Euro Nymphing to try to win the national championship, right?
Right.
Vladi does seminars literally around the world on this technique, and you're going to be blessed with his instruction because you're learning from the master. So let's get started.
Okay.
First thing Vladi's going to do is fish the water closest to him before he wades out. He's casting up. Notice the line, there's not a big belly. He's moving the rod tip. He's going to rotate his wrist with a little quick flick and cast it up. No false casting. Again, look at the angle of the line. Comes back. Now, the reason he's flicking that wrist is the fish sometimes will follow the fly. By flicking the wrist, it'll move it enough, and a lot of times they'll grab it. In fact, I'm going to bet that we're going to see a fish caught with that flick of the wrist. Notice how he's extending himself. It's very important to understand this cast. Watch how his arm is just like the rod. Now, notice how he brings the rod over like that. He brings that over there so that it keeps the angle of the line going upstream. So all the line lands upstream. You don't have a belly in the line where the line is pulling the fly. The anchor fly is hitting the bottom. Now, many times in the course of the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about line and what that line's going to do for you. You're going to actually see the line jumping up and down. And when you see that line jumping up and down, that means it's touching the bottom. And between his fingers, he's going to feel a lot. The more you fish this technique, the more you're going to understand what the relationship between that line through the leader into the fly. Why do you have that relationship? It's because you're pulling the line. You're feeling it. And that is where the European type of fishing really shines in this type of water. The rod is straight above the line and he's leading it. He's actually letting the fly sink. By holding the rod up higher, it's sinking down. Now see how he brings the rod down? And now it's right on the bottom then. Again, it's sinking. See, this is a little bit technique. He's not really pulling it. This is why I say the more I watch him fish. Now see how he raises his arm up? The arm and the rod are one. And that's the hardest part of this, everybody, is learning to do that. Because we're used to fishing a whole different way. We're not used to fishing our whole arm. Now again, he's letting it sink. You're going to rotate the wrist. There he goes, and there's a fish. Flying fish, no less. I know there's bigger fish out there, and you're going to watch in a minute. You're going to see them being caught.
It's a little guy.
Yeah.
Yes. Fish. Hoppa. Nice fish.
Come on, fish.
Okay.
Really good place to try your European nymphing. Notice that Vladi is going for the rocks, trying to cast so that it gets swept by the edges of the rocks. This time of the day, high sun, the fish are going to be tucked into those rocks, being opportunistic. He's pulling them a little bit slower than he would in the faster water. Again, letting him get the, hit the bottom that time. Really see here how the rod is pointing and following the fly. The current is going to dictate how fast he pulls the fly. Again, working the rocks, trying to find any fish that might be tucked right on the bottom, still feeding. European nymphing works very well in the heat of the day when there isn't a hatch, when you have to really, like, as they say, farm a fish out. I call it a good lunch technique. Bring out the rod at lunch, practice your European technique. Now he's working closer towards the other side. Notice that he stepped forward. He repositions his step very methodically. Raising his rod tip up.
Change fly.
Change flies. Now he's going to change some flies. He's not getting the effect. Now how would you know when to change flies? Well, that's a feel that you're going to get when you think you should have had a fish, which he thought, and didn't get one. Kind of doing a downstream, swinging it farther down, letting the current swing it. Kind of good caddis technique. So the caddis will go with the current and swing to the surface. Letting it go quite deep now. Right on the bottom. There we go. Oh, that was a nice fish. Really working those rocks. Little backwaters behind the rocks. Rocks, of course, affect the current. And what you don't see on the surface, there we go, went right through the rock. That's just where I expected there to be a fish. Notice again how fast from the competition, he makes sure he gets them right in. Notice where the net was, so he just kind of slides them right in. This is why he was the world champion. Hey. What you just saw was Vladi hook that fish with his Polish technique. This is where it really shines. The current goes behind the rock and gets sucked in. If you have a strike indicator, what it'll do is that when the fly gets sucked in, it pulls the indicator down. With this technique, the rod's high, the fly gets sucked into the rock, you pull it back out, the fish sees it, and just what you saw right there, you connect up. It's a deadly technique when fishing behind a rock. One of the problems is the rock, especially when they're submerged, doesn't show you that little sucking in current that makes it so effective, and why fish can just lay in there and wait for the flies to come to them. He's working this area, he's keeping a lower profile. Notice one knee is down, the other is up. Gives him good stability, keeps his profile low. And again, he's working where he thinks there ought to be fish. Going a little deeper.
Nice water.
Now we're coming up behind a rock, a very good spot. You're going to work the edge of the current. This is again where a European method is very effective. Heavy water, difficult, looks like the fly change. He's going to go to a heavier fly to get it down deeper. He worked his way up a shallow area to get into the deeper pocket, and now he's going to make the change to fly.
Don't see any fish here. Surprise! My worm fly worm fly is good.
We're going to go to a pretty deep pool that would be very difficult to fish with an indicator. One, you'd get somewhat of success, but probably not as much as if you'd learned this technique. Now, Vladi, it's really important how you hold your rod to control the depth of the fly and how fast you pull it, right?
Yes. When I cast, you know, to the pool like this, to deep water, fast water, like rapids, I try to put my flies to the bottom, especially the anchor fly.
Right.
And then I try move both flies a little bit faster than current. Because, like you know, every insects, when they come from the bottom, they are a little bit faster.
They propel themselves. Either they're like caddis prepare themselves, mayflies will swim, some will just drift up to the surface so they can hatch.
Yeah, they can hatch. And then I move my flies a little bit faster than current. And on the end, try to set a little bit faster, you know, but this is a very short movement. And this movement can imitate.
Imitates?
Imitates the movement of the insects.
Actually,
So
you're
it's
keeping
very
it.
important.
Now, I think this is important for all of you out there to understand. You're really not pulling. You think you might be pulling it fast from the current, but really what you're doing is keeping your line tight so that you feel a fish strike. With an indicator, you don't know where your fly is. Here you know how your fly is moving because you're the one controlling it. And every time I watch this man fish, I learn something new. So let's go show us a little bit about that. I'm going to wander out with you, but let me talk to you about another thing too. This is not something your buddy hangs next to you. You don't do that. You do it by yourself. You get down low in a lot of places. You crawl. It's not a buddy system, is it?
Yeah, but you know, some fish are in shallow water and see you immediately.
Right.
You know, I try to be always on the not when the sun is going to my face. I try to be like that. The fish don't see the shadow.
Right.
The shadow, you know.
Again, you can see a little bit different water in this part. He's casting upstream. Again, immediate contact with the line. Look at the rod. He's following the rod. Watch the line. Looked like he might have had a little bump right there. A little higher rod, letting it get deeper. He's gonna pull it now just slightly. Again, watch the rod tip. Very important to see where this line is. It's between that middle finger. Again, he's following it down. The faster the water, many times the shorter the pull or the stroke almost, the way that he's working this. Now see how he's extending his arm? Rod tip goes lower to the water. He's actually bumping right on the bottom. You can see the line, how it was jumping. Look how it's jumping. We're going to extend the drift by actually leaning the rod tip and the whole rod into the water. Again, keeping in contact. Watch this. He's going to then tilt the rod down, extend the arm, and increase the drift. Now, the next cast, he's going to keep it high, as you can see right here. Again, it's at a different water level. You want to vary your drifts. Some in tight to the water, some a little higher, some a little quicker, some a little slower. Now, Vladi, let me ask you, what are you trying to feel here? What do you feel?
I feel immediately when, like you says, I control all the time flies. I have contact with the flies.
You feel the fly through the rod.
Any touch I feel immediately here. Any touch. And the thing is that sometimes I feel bottom. I feel everything what is on the bottom.
But you're also watching that line too.
Yeah, but you know, I watch line because sometimes line is straight.
It goes in. Could that mean something has happened? That's connection.
Something is connection.
You're using all your senses, aren't you? You're using to feel from the line.
And
your eyes.
And my eyes.
And then also you're using something else.
Yeah.
Which right up here.
That's true.
That you just know there's a fish there, and I'm going to set it because it should be there, right?
Yeah, that's true. You must reach water.
Right, read water.
Read water. If you fish with this method.
You don't fish water there isn't going to be a fish in, are you?
But you must always thinking. It's never like this. You can come to water and bark and fish. No.
Okay, now we fish this pretty carefully. Yeah. What would you fish it any different? We've tried, 5 or 6 casts.
I try to be a little bit
up in there. Okay, let's do that. Let's do that.
Because I think the flies is going to deeper. Right?
About each current is going to dictate how you move that line.
I agree.
The number one problem that I see when I see people first learn this, they cast and they don't immediately start pulling the line. That is a hard thing for most anglers in America to understand. The minute that line hits, you're going to be in contact.
Immediately you must have contact. Sometimes you can cast and immediately you have fish. You feel like immediately. Because always fish watching, something in the water.
Now, how would you fish that riff over there?
You see is a V over there. I try to cast up.
Well, show me. Come on, just show me. Let's get. Okay. We'll go real slow. I don't want to go swimming. It's the end of the day, and.
See, try to be in V.
Ooh, that looked pretty good.
See, little.
But I would definitely want to be where that edge is, because those fish are going to lay in there, aren't they?
That's true.
Well, I thought you had one there.
Maybe. I don't think so. There's too many fish here, but who knows?
Now, would you think?
Try to be near the stone, very close to the rock here, to the stone here.
Notice how the rod is lower.
Like this.
And it's going right under the rock.
Because always in the bottom of the rock could be hole.
The current is actually taking and pulling the fly into the rock, and he's allowing that to happen with the swing of the rod.
See.
Ooh. That's where Mr. Big Brown Trout would be laying.
Yes.
Okay, now what about the tail of the pool here? If we don't get anything here, would you fish the tail? Okay, we're going to go down and fish the tail.
I know now where they are.
I'm going to introduce you to a Team USA member, Pete Erickson from Boise, Idaho. He's going to introduce you to Spanish nymphing. How'd you find out about this?
Team USA, we were in Spain, and we were lucky enough to be guided by a two-time national champion, and he got out on the river and started doing something that looked really, really weird to us. And we asked him if he would show us how to do it, and he said, yeah.
One of the big aspects of this is that you use a longer leader.
Sometimes up to 27 feet.
But there was something that Aitor, and that was his name, introduced it to, and that was a section of colored leader. It was golden in color.
Yeah, you can use a couple different kinds. He also used fluorocarbon, red, yellow, even green too.
In America, the leader lengths aren't usually that long, are they?
No, and in fact, when I teach people how to Spanish nymph, I usually start them out with a 9-foot Spanish nymphing leader because it's easier to handle, you know.
But Aitor used, what, up to 28 feet?
Yeah, he said, I mean, we did the math on the metrics because I'm not so good with that, but it was probably pushing 30 feet.
But the flies are the same as what we use in regular European nymphing?
Vladi's flies actually work really well with this technique, and in fact, Aitor used a lot of Vladi flies.
So we're going to go out on the Big Thompson. You just finished the National Fly Fishing Championship. How'd you do?
I'm tired. I just got off the river a couple minutes ago. I don't know what the final standings will be, but I was second going into today, and keep my fingers crossed that I stayed up there toward the top.
Well, the technique is going to have some similarities, but the way this is rigged up, and there are some things that you're going to learn here that's going to work on your water. So let's get started on the Big Thompson.
Yeah, this looks like a great stretch of river for this.
Yeah, it's great. That beautiful day, too. You know, when we're walking down, we were talking about this technique uses more line and leader than the traditional Polish and Czech European techniques.
It does. That's one of the reasons that I like it so much. You actually get to use a little bit of fly line, and the leaders are much longer too.
I noticed you have a section, it looks like about 2 feet of, I would call it golden strand.
You could certainly use golden strand.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of different colored monofilaments, colored fluorocarbons that you can use as this, basically it's an indicator. And it's a key component to the Spanish nymphing style.
This can be more visual than probably the other technique, as you can see that.
It is, it's fun.
One of the important parts of Spanish nymphing is you can really fish deep water well in heavy, fast raging rivers.
Heavy, fast water. Well, think about it. You've got straight fluorocarbon, so it sinks like a rock. And plus you have long leaders, so you have reach. in case you can't get to something, you can fish a seam on the other side of a boulder or a deep pool.
You know where I know this would really work well is in New Zealand.
Oh, I'm sure
where you
it
had
would.
to go deep into some of those deep pools right on the bottom.
Another thing that's beautiful about Spanish nymphing is it's great for spooky fish.
Oh, that's another thing. I noticed that we've got some spooky fish in front of us here, and we're down in the water.
Oh, absolutely. This is a great looking hole, but I think some of these fish are kind of wary of us right now.
Now it's bright sun, October day. Well, let's get started. Okay. Now this is, again, no false casting, right?
Right. With a leader that's, I'm probably going to go with about a 12 or 13 foot leader. I usually recommend when I instruct on Spanish nymphing, start with about a 9. It's much easier to cast, but I'm going to go with a little bit bigger. And you can't false cast her, or else you'll tangle it. So you get one lob.
One lob. All right.
And I'll lob it. And then there's a lot of maintenance here. I got to bring that indicator up a little bit.
Oh, I can see it right out of the water.
And I see the backward C.
Yep. Yep.
That'll let me know if I have a fish. And see, I just checked to see if I had one.
Yep.
And I'm back in. And you got to check it, whether it's a rock or a fish. You got to check everything. And there you go. You can even have it. You can even have it swing out, and maybe even twitch the flies a little bit at the end. Yeah, which is kind of a nice part of this technique as well.
Good swimming caddis technique.
You can do just about anything with Spanish nymphing. I like to. The main use really is Polish nymphing from a distance.
Polish nymphing from a distance. That's a good way to put it.
Now, if I can free myself up here, watch. I'm going to lead the flies after I lob it into this hole. Now, of course, I just did a false cast, but you're not supposed to. Watch. See how I'm leading the flies? They're actually cruising along.
This cast is interesting. It's different than Vladi's cast, isn't it?
Yes, it's actually called a lob. And if you watch, I lead with the back of my hand, and that lob actually gives me a tuck cast.
Boy, Aitor was a master of it, wasn't he?
Oh,
rock
little
fish.
rock. Watch.
He was the master of that lob.
You lead with the back of the hand, and it actually tuck casts in. You dial in to where you can see your indicator and float through the hole.
And you're just increasingly going further into the hole, aren't you?
Yep, I'm working my way over right now.
This would be a great technique for using like a girdle bug or even a woolly bug or yuck bug.
True, I have not found a fly that doesn't respond to this technique. I really haven't. It's a pretty cool technique. You can even do it with emergers, small nymphs. I really like the Polish nymphs for this stuff. And that's what I have on right now. We'll see if these brown trout respond to the Polish nymph. I will add a little line. Here's the beauty of this. You can just keep adding line.
Yes, so you don't have to position yourself. Vladi takes steps forward. He casts the same amount of line each time.
Yeah, exactly. I can add line. Well, if I manage my line a little bit better. There. Adding line, coming up. There's a big rock right there I got to stay away from. Surprised I didn't get a fish on that one right there. There we go. Now, one thing with Spanish nymphing that is a little bit tricky is if you get a real strong wind blowing upstream, it can mess with you a little bit.
Hard to lob into a heavy wind.
My advice for lobbing into a heavy wind is to use a heavier anchor.
Heavier anchor, yeah.
Yep.
Just bullet it through.
Yep. And what'll happen is you won't have quite the nice backward C with your leader, but you'll still be able to keep it down there and control it.
Nice swing.
And there's the lob. What you got to do is immediately strip in line so you can bring up your leader. Oh, that may have been a little bump right there. Got 2 flies on here, 1 dropper. They're both out of Vladi's box. And that little ledge should produce a fish for us right there. Now that wind's starting to mess with me a little bit, but I should be able to get it in there. I have a heavy enough anchor. Hey, maybe I have too heavy of an anchor.
Yeah.
Fly shops love this technique.
Yeah, be prepared with any of the Euro techniques to lose a few flies.
There we go. I'm going to go up a little bit higher on this thing.
Oh, there goes tight. Well, you can really see that.
A rock, but yeah, you have a lot of visibility on the indicator. See how you can see every single rock? That's one of the things I love about this technique.
Now you can use green or red or any bright colored leader material.
Yep. One of the keys too is to have a 10-foot rod.
Yeah.
You can certainly do it with another rod, but it's sure nice to reach up here.
Some of these light spay rods would be perfect for this.
They would actually work for this. Well, let's dance around that rock a little bit more.
Oh, tight again.
Yep. Now, see, you can actually, without hanging up on a rock, just kind of glance off of them. So the palm up enables you to flip that lob where you want it. It's actually pretty accurate. It may look like it's hard to be accurate that way, but you eventually get it. Another nice byproduct of this, of holding the rod this way, is that you almost always throw a nice tuck cast.
Now, one thing that I noticed that you're actually shooting some line, which Vladi isn't.
Well, another advantage of Spanish nymphing is that you get to actually use some fly line. Let's say that the hole is, 25 feet away. I'll do a little demonstration.
There's the advantage of having a longer rod.
All of a sudden I can say, I want to go to that rock over there. And depending on how good of a lobber you are, you can shoot it over there. And then you actually have fly line on the water.
Yeah,
now, I watched him shoot up to 45 feet of line with this style. Granted, it was a much bigger river than this, but it was really cool. He would shoot it through here and hold it with his hand.
Wow.
Amazing. But so it's a versatile technique.
Well, it adds to one more element of fishing without a true indicator, or float, or bobber, whatever you want to call it. You've learned a lot being on Team USA. You've gone to Spain, Slovakia, Sweden. What techniques have you learned?
Well, the Spanish nymphing technique, for one. I went to Vladi boot camp for Polish nymphing, and that was totally awesome. Another one is the French technique, which is probably it's got to be considered one of the most effective techniques in the world.
Well, you know so much about the French and have fished against them. Why don't you assist Vladi in showing all our viewers about the French techniques? They've won, what, 6 world championships?
And 5 in a row at one point.
So you've learned something from them. Why don't you help us with Vladi so our viewers can see how effective the French techniques are?
That would be fantastic. Let's do it. Now that we're done demonstrating the Spanish nymphing technique on the river, let's take a look at the equipment needed for it. You're going to need a long rod, preferably 10 feet. The line is a weight forward. You can use a 4, 5, or 6. Now, as far as building the leader material, there are a few components that we need to talk about. I usually start off with a store-bought knotless leader, okay? I go with about a 9-foot 4X, and I snip it down to about 4 feet. So connected to our weight forward fly line, we have monofilament tapered leader. I usually attach it to a butt section with a barrel knot, and then you head on down the taper. This section would be about 4 feet. Then you get to your colored fluorocarbon. Some people use monofilament, but colored fluorocarbon is a preferred. And you can attach this with a barrel knot or even a surgeon's knot. Now, depending on how far away from you're fishing, this colored fluorocarbon can be about 2 feet, 3 feet. Then you attach it to straight fluorocarbon, and depending on your fishing conditions, again, it can be 3X, 4X, 5X, even 6X. Now, the depth of the water is really important here. If you're fishing a 3-foot hole, you want about 6 feet of straight fluorocarbon down to your flies. Then you get to your dropper fly. Now, the knot that connects the dropper is another barrel knot. This time, it has a long tag. You can see the dropper fly attached to the extra tag of the barrel knot. Then you head on down another couple feet until you get to the very end, the point fly of the leader system. And it's usually a heavy weighted fly, or an anchor fly, like what we like to call it. Now, as far as overall length of the leader, I say start off with 9 foot. 9 foot's the easiest thing that you can use to get out on the river right away. You can work yourself up to 15 feet and get out there and have fun with this awesome Spanish nymphing technique. You can see Vladi behind me doing the French technique. I'm going to go join him and let's see how this is done. So this technique looks awful familiar to some of the stuff I've seen in Europe. This is what we know as the French roll, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you need to do with the French roll.
You know, like normal simple roll cast, but it must be a little bit faster than current, like in my methods. Very similar.
So it's similar to Polish nymphing.
Yeah, different is only that we fish with a long line, and this method, you know, French guy fish always upstream. Never this side, only upstream. But
so that's unique to the French nymphing technique?
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, how long is this leader that you're using?
Leader is almost two length of my rod.
18 feet?
18 feet.
Really? That's a long leader. And you handle it pretty well. Is it pretty easy to roll over?
Much easier. Very easy, you know.
I noticed, like in the Spanish nymphing technique, that there's some colored monofilament in there. Is that colored?
That's very important. There's colored monofilament. Just in the middle, you know, between, I should say, two sections, yeah? Then you see all the time where is your nymph, you know, like this.
So it's a strike indicator?
Yeah, like strike indicator. Oh.
How many nymphs do you usually fish with this technique?
Two. Of course, the guys use 3, but not that heavy. The French guys use not that heavy nymph, only just, you know, medium, like maybe half gram, like something like that.
I see. So the nymphs traditionally are smaller and lighter than with Polish nymphing.
That's true.
Now, what's the kind of the key point? How are you trying to excite the fish to take the fly?
All the time, you know, all the time the colored monofill.
Mm-hmm.
And you exactly see when the fish touch your fly, you see the monofill stop, like indicator. But they use fluorescent color of the monofill. And you see them, you know, maybe 10, 15 meters is no problem, or like you see it. Hop.
I noticed you're making a lot of casts with this technique.
Yeah.
Is that key to doing this?
Yes. This is technique of a million cast almost.
And the flies don't seem to be dead drifting. No. They're moving, is that right?
Yeah, that's moving.
From what I've learned about the French technique in fishing over in Europe, I hear that that's what gets the fish to grab the fly. Yeah. They see it moving, and it's actually kind of almost like a wet fly situation.
Yeah, almost all flies is under the surface. Okay. Oh.
Now, how far can you fish with this technique away from you effectively?
I think 20.
Probably 20, 30 feet?
20, 30 feet.
Okay, because you got to roll it over, right? Yeah. And you got to stay in contact with it.
But if you stay in the bushes, and this French roll cast is very useful because you'll see.
Is that one of the similarities between Polish nymphing and Spanish nymphing, that you got to stay in contact with the flies?
Yes, but
I've noticed
I feel in Polish touch of the fish in my finger, but here all the time you must watching those two colored monofill.
Oh, so like Spanish nymphing, this is sight and not feel, right? It's all sight. Okay.
Speed is the same, you know, like. You see the white bubbles, white plumes, will be a little bit faster than the white plumes, you know, like in Polish method.
So you're leading the fly again, just like all these European techniques that we've talked about.
Oh, like this. You see the monofill? You can watch all the time the monofill. You see, if they stop. Okay. You go there.
I see, it's moving a little bit faster than the bubbles. That's a good tip. I'll remember that.
You know, you see.
So it's not just dead drifting. Now, how far do the flies sink? Does that depend on how heavy a flies you use?
Yes, that's sometimes I use very light nymphs, little.
And is that when the trout are coming up to take it?
All the time.
Okay. It's amazing. You're moving through the water, just going bam, bam,
No
bam,
hanging,
bam, bam.
No nothing, you know, no hanging all the time. Like,
It's almost
and
like
they
you're
fish,
just.
you know, all wide of the river. Like maybe they start in that place here, next cast almost in the same place, and you know, like another cast, you know, all land of the all white, you know, of the river. Yeah?
Right.
And almost every single centimeter, the flies penetrate, you know, the surface. Like this. Yes,
Now, what rod do you prefer for this French technique? How long, and is it stiff or soft, or?
French, a little bit, you know, the rods they are looking for 12 feet, 11 feet.
So wow, a 12-foot rod. Yeah. Some of the French guys use. Can you use a 9-foot rod for this?
Yeah.
All right.
Change also line. They use now long rod, line number 3, something like that. A very fast rod.
I see. So they go down.
Yeah.
They go down a line length.
Yeah.
Or I mean a line weight. I'm sorry. And is it a double taper or weight forward?
Weight forward.
It's a weight forward. Okay.
I can say.
And then you just kind of work your way up the.
Where is the fish?
The riffle. I don't know. I don't know that when the French do this, they seem to always have fish on the end of the line. There are a few bugs coming off.
Yeah, a few bugs now.
Can you use this technique in kind of, you know, pocket water or rapids or things like that?
Come to pocket here, like here, and you know, like maybe here also.
I noticed that's kind of the nice thing about the.
Always drift down. Yeah.
The nice thing about this technique is it's really versatile. You know, you can cover a lot of different types of water without changing your leader, and you can move through the water pretty effectively.
To the pocket, you can fish shorter line, like maybe like this, and same speed, like up, and again, yeah, same speed. You can cast to pocket, you know, down to up, and all that. Yeah.
It's a great technique.
Yeah.
Is it hard to learn to get to that kind of pick it up and flip it over? I know it looks a lot like a roll cast. That's why we call it the French roll.
It's like twice here. I see, like maybe spay like this. You know.
Yeah, it looks like you're creating a D loop, like in a spay cast.
Again, here we go.
Definitely a D loop.
See? Oh.
Yeah, no, that looks good. So
very useful. And again, we go right, left, and hook. See, and same speed, faster than the bubbles. And then you can just like this, near the bank.
It's a good looking spot of water.
Yeah.
So Vladi, since there's a difference between a roll cast, straight roll cast, and a French roll cast, show me the difference. Can I see a roll cast and then also the French technique?
Okay, this is a simple roll cast.
Okay, straight roll cast.
You can come very slow, almost stop, and then you cast.
I see.
Yeah? And now the French come here and make like spay, and again.
I see. So what you're doing is bringing the line back through here?
They use like this because sometimes almost always they fish in a very narrow streams.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, then if you make it like this, you come easily to, you know, nearby you with line.
Right, you can load the line that way. I see. So if you're out here in a big kind of wide open stretch, you can just create a D loop and fire it out there. I see.
broadcast they use when they have, you know, kind of not easy water, like, you know, bushes on your back, something like that.
Right.
Narrow.
I've seen a lot of the French team members in tight little competition areas using this technique.
Almost they fish, you know, but almost short cast and, you know, and very, very fast speed. That's the difference. Is only, I think, line, the length of the line, because they cast with a very, very long line, watching, you know, the color monofield.
Yeah, no, what do you think though? What's your opinion? Why is this so much more effective than some of the other techniques?
Times the fish take the fly, you know, under the surface. And that is good, that is more effective. You know.
So the movement of the flies. Yeah. Okay, and also?
If you're competing, you know, like in competition, such fish is okay, you know.
Right. So this technique...
every fish are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this technique will bring fish to the surface and
bring
a lot of little fish like this.
A lot of little fish, and then you can count this fish, you know, to your score.
I see why this is so effective. Also the flies are moving and you're in contact with them. It's not dead drift.
Contact, yeah. It's not dead drift, you have all the time contact with the flies. Yes, good. Let him go first.
Then you're gonna go over the other shoulder. I noticed that you can do that. If I weren't standing here, you can go over the other shoulder too, right? Over the in case there's some brush or other things around you.
Try, huh? A little bit.
Sure. I gotta watch that tree. Oops, a little heavier than I thought. I was actually using this technique a little bit today.
Right. Good. I think you saw a couple. You saw the French guys like Said, like Jacques. Watch the.
Woo! A little close to that tree. If we could just get a fish to grab this. Notice that almost all the French guys have this technique just dialed in.
This technique comes from you know, from the guys who compete in competition, in championship.
So let's recap some of the interesting characteristics of the French roll or the French nymphing technique. Well, first of all, you're in full contact with the flies. You're doing what looks like a roll cast, but slightly different. It kind of has a D loop, and it looks like a spay cast a little bit more to me. The next thing is, as soon as those flies land, it seems to me from the way that you're bringing them in, you're moving them instantly, and those flies are actually moving toward the surface. Kind of simulates the rise form. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And
characteristic of this fishing.
Okay, the next thing that I noticed also was that it's more sight than feel. Polish nymphing is feel, the French roll is sight.
Yeah, and I move upstream all the time.
Right, you're moving along. Okay, good. Well, thanks for showing me this technique. Well, Vladi, now that we fished that run with the French roll technique, let's take a look at some of the equipment that's needed for the French roll. I noticed that you use a pretty long rod. What is that, a 9.5 foot rod?
9.5 foot rod.
Okay, could you use a 10-foot rod?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and then the fly line is a what again? Yeah. What type of fly line?
Number 5.
Is it a weight forward?
Weight forward.
Okay. Now, help me out with this leader a little bit here. I noticed that you have, what, you have a tapered?
Yeah.
Is it monofilament?
Tapered monofilament, yeah.
Okay, this looks like probably about...
And then we are coming to...
About a 12-foot what?
Yeah,
4X?
Foot, yeah, 4X. And then we are coming to the place.
Oh, this is interesting.
Is the key to the French fishing.
Okay, this is the key. This is similar to the Spanish technique.
Yeah,
they've got colored monofilament.
Yeah.
Let's see, it looks like you've attached these with barrel blood knots, is that right? Blood knots? Okay, this is really good for visibility, I can see that. And this is what, 2 feet maybe?
2 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 feet, almost 2 feet.
And then you attach with a blood knot to the straight
3X.
monofilament.
Monofilament.
Okay.
3X.
Oh, okay, and then I see that it looks like you've just got what's similar to Polish nymphing and Spanish nymphing. You got a dropper, and an anchor fly, which is much lighter in this situation. How long is the leader total in length?
Total is about 14 feet.
Okay, 14 feet. So it's kind of a long leader.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now we're all set. Now we can build this leader. We can get out there and practice this awesome new technique.
Of course.
All right.
Okay.
Is 12 feet, 6x from the fly line. The indicator is. Then you have another 10 feet of either 5 or 6x where the nymph is. And he's just very subtle on his sets because you have a fly that's basically, it's as heavy as 10 flies and you got it 6x. And he's working it through these rocks just magically. It's amazing. Now he's working his hands too. He keeps enough line out so that he can work fast and get to rocks that are a little farther away. He started close, and I mean it almost looks like Czech nymphing when he's this close, but the advantage is he can work farther and farther away each cast by letting that line out.
You can see why the nymph speed is very slow than the current.
So okay.
The bottom current is slow. The top current is very high.
Más despacio en el bajo de río. Okay. So what he's saying is the river speed is slower on the bottom than it is on the top, which makes sense. A lot of people know that. So the nymph speed, you have to go slower than the river. It's the same idea as the Czech nymphing. See, el mismo, the Czech nymphing.
Yeah.
Más despacio. Lead.
If you cast, and your line is top of the water, the speed of the water.
Oh, it's a great point.
The nymphs is very, very speed.
Right. If the fly line is touching the water, no one likes that. No one likes that. It's a blessing and a curse in fishing to be a lefty. Short line, okay. I see. Más corto.
Okay.
See? Otra vez. See?
Yo siento cuando la ninfa toca la piedra.
Okay, I understand. What he's doing basically is he's got a little strike indicator on his on the long 22-foot leader, and hardly any, basically no fly line out of the rod at all, and he's watching the strike indicator. He's just working this pocket here for fish. And he's going to let it swing a little. Now he's going to lob it over.
A couple other things I'd add. Polish nymphing is not for everywhere. I would not walk into a slow water, clear water situation and expect a Polish nymph. Because when you're Polish nymphing, you're fishing a very short line. Sometimes I have as little as 6 inches of fly line out the tip of my rod on a 6-foot level fluorocarbon leader. If a fish is spooky, he's not going to let you get that close. So it's ideal for places like the Madison, the Box Canyon, or a river that's slightly off color. You know, another week here we'll be messing around down in the green in Pinedale above the Warren Bridge. The water will be tea-colored, but you can walk right up to your best pools, be 5 feet from the fish and catch them. Polish nymphing is deadly for that. I have actually modified the Polish nymphing a little bit so that I can use it for the fishing we do so much around here, and that is actually float fishing. I usually see people going down the river when they're float fishing nymphing with big bobber size indicators. I'm not into that at all. I had a really fun experience a couple years ago with Jack. We were floating the Platte over by Casper, and I had never tried to Polish nymph out of the boat. but the fish were not eating dries by any means. The water was a little off color. There's a lot of people walking around, so I knew that the boat could go right over fish and they wouldn't be spooked. So what the heck? Put on a couple of Vladi's flies, and I Polish nymphed from the front and the back of the boat. Of course, I wasn't using 6 inches of fly line. I had to use about 3 to 6 feet, but I kind of mended in order to stay tight, and it was deadly. It was one of the funner days of nymph fishing I've ever had in my life. I don't like to make fun of my friends, but I will say that it was an amazing day that day on the Platte, because I was messing around with this Polish nymphing and doing really well. Jack and Scott Sanchez were actually doing the traditional indicator fishing out of the boat, and I think I caught maybe 12 to 15 fish that day, and those guys maybe caught 1 or 2 fish that day.
Using the same flies.
And they were using the same exact flies. So play with this. This is a great technique. There are a lot of great European techniques that Jack covers on this tape. Try them. Feel free to modify them. Feel free to do it anything you want with them, as long as it's helping you catch more fish. One of the important things in Polish nymphing is to have the proper leader. You know, if you go into most fly shops and say, I'm going to do some nymphing, sell me a leader, they're probably going to sell you a tapered 7.5 foot leader for like 2x. Makes sense. You're going to be dredging, you might as well have 2x. Not the case for Polish nymphing, because we already talked a little bit about you have to be in contact with the fish. And with your 7.5 foot leader trying to nymph without an indicator, you're probably going to get a bellow in the line. Vladi taught me to use literally a 5 to 6 foot leader. When I first met him, he used a level leader and very light, 4, maybe 6 pound test. And you think about it, if that's tied right off your fly line to the fly, you have a good feel. There's no bellow because that line is straightened out by the weight of the flies. Now my leader setup, and in Vladi's, we've modified a little bit. I do no butt section, definitely no 30 or 25 pound butt section, because they always coil up and that's going to cost you feeling strikes. I do about a 1x fluorocarbon butt section off my fly line. I jump to 3x, and then my tippet, which I'll do about 2 feet of it, will be either 4x or, in rare cases, when I'm in Europe, really, I'd never do it around here, but 5x to feel those little grayling.
Okay, talk about fluorocarbon.
Fluorocarbon is something that I didn't use a whole lot before I started fishing the World Championships. The only thing I had used it for was my droppers. Now I use it a lot for my subsurface lake fishing and always for Polish nymphing. Fluorocarbon is denser than water, therefore it sinks quicker, and you're trying to reach bottom where the fish live when you're nymphing. Why not use tippet that helps you get there quicker? I construct my leaders. I told you they're going to be 6 feet long maximum. I'll put about 2 feet of 1x off my fly line. Then I put about 2 feet of 3x, which I triple surgeon knot to my 1x. I always do a triple when I'm messing with fluorocarbon, because sometimes the knot strength is where you can go wrong there. Triple's never a problem. And then I attach my tippet section, which I already said would be either 4x or 5x, with another triple surgeons. And that second fly is always a big question, how you want to attach that. First time I do it, I'll literally just leave a hang off my surgeon's knot, about 6 to 7 inches long, and I go with that. But of course, after I change flies a few times, it gets shorter, and you think to yourself, well, I'm going to have to change my 4x tippet quite often. Not the case. You don't have to do that. I simply take another piece of 4x and I tie a perfection loop in one end, loop to loop it to my tippet above that surgeon's knot, so it'll actually be attached to my 3x portion of my leader, the midsection of my leader. Pull it tight, tie my fly on, and then that is my new hang for my second fly, or my top fly.
Follow the fly, and then when I'm done with this, hop step up or hop step down, you know. Then I covered all single centimeter of the water. And again, hop, like this, hop step up. What I am fishing, I like fishing from the bottom to top, because fish don't see you. You like grayling, like some, maybe trout, but grayling don't see you like this. If you come to the head of the pool and you go down many times, you can every fish spook, you know, like this. Of course, if I go from the top, then I cover water, one half step down, and half step down again. And again, the same, up, step down, you know, and again. Don't remember, always this little loop here is helpful a lot. And again, down, you know, and up, and again, down, up, yeah. Like follow the fly, and then when I'm done with this, hop step up or hop step down, you know. Then I covered all single centimeter of the water. And again, hop, like this, hop step up. What I am fishing, I like fishing from the bottom to top, because fish don't see you. You like grayling, like some, maybe trout, but grayling don't see you like this. If you come to the head of the pool and you go down many times you can every fish spook, you know, like this. Of course, if I go from the top, then I cover water, one half step down, and half step down again. And again, the same, up, step down, you know, and again. Don't remember, always this little loop here is helpful a lot. And again, down, you know, and up, and again, down, up, yeah. Go up to the surface, always with the current a little bit, you know. And then this natural movement, when I follow the fly like this, is very, very similar like you know, the insect come up from the water. And then I cast upstream and a little faster than water, and I come like 1, 2, 3, and you know, come up from the water. And again, sometimes I have my rod a little bit higher, but then I use, you know, longer line. That I am a little bit higher with my rod because I want to see the end of my line, you know. And when I fish nearby my feet, then it's not necessary to have very high, because, you know, length of the leader must be, all monofilament must be in water. Then I'm very, very low.
How long a leader? I mean, that's a question.
Okay, the leader must be, for nymphing, like 2/3 of my rod. 2/3 for the Polish nymphing. 2/3.
So if your rod's 9 foot,
yeah.
7-foot rod.
Yeah, 7-foot rod.
Leader.
Yes, 7-foot leader. And I have 10 rod, of course. 2/3 of rod. It's
okay.